This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our coverage of Cuba with Catherine Murphy, a filmmaker who lived and studied in Cuba in the 90s. Her film, titled Maestra, explores the stories of the youngest women teachers in the 1961 National Literacy Campaign in Cuba. Catherine Murphy joins us from Miami. We want to welcome you to Democracy Now! We're going to be playing another piece of Karen Ranucci's, looking at organic agriculture. Very interesting in Cuba, Catherine. But it also goes to the issue of private enterprise, not just small mom-and-pop shops, restaurants, bed and breakfasts. But what about the multinationals? How are they preparing to enter Cuba, Catherine?
Well, yes, I think there is a lot of desire on behalf of the multinationals to enter Cuba, pretty untapped markets with a large buyer, even though there are only, well, there are 11 million people on the island, but there's central buyers for key food and agriculture products. So it's a large market for the corporations. They are hungry to get into those markets. But the Cubans, I think, have both a need for increasing key imports and also a lot of healthy skepticism of not giving the corporations too much space, not losing key industries on the island, and not losing control over key sectors of the economy.
Well, let's go to this second piece of Karen Ranucci's from her recent trip to Cuba. This one looking at organic farming on the island. It begins with Fernando Funes Jr., who runs a farm outside of Havana.
This land belongs to the previous farmer living here. He is now 96 years old. The land still belongs to him. And I farm the land. So it's part of the appropriation of the land, but in another way. So you care the land, you farm the land, and until you can. Well, we started here with one bed 2 years ago. And now we have more than 100 beds in which we produce vegetables to sell directly to the consumers in the city. All what we do here is based on organic agricultural practices, and there is a criticism about organic agriculture, which is not able to feed the world, and we think it's the opposite. We can take advantage of the knowledge already accumulated for hundreds of years of farmers and the knowledge from science. We manage the system in a way that doesn't need the use of pesticides. We have beehives in the farm. When you have enough beehives to start as a beekeeper, then the government starts providing you this advice, technical advice, and also inputs, the boxes and all the materials necessary to grow faster. And we don't see that problem that is already identified in different countries, like in the United States, about a beehive or honey collapse. We see that they are growing very, very well. In the last year, there is more and more possibilities for farmers and for the whole population to participate in the economic relationships that follow food production or services. There is the possibility to start new businesses based on food distribution and also on food processing in order to increase the capacity to make use of production. With organic agriculture, with agroecology, we are able to produce healthy food in order to grow healthy people in the cities and in the whole country. And when we have this kind of system, then we can also assure that we have enough labor for people in the countryside and better expectation for them to live better from their work.
Yo, bibliotecaria.
I was a librarian.
I worked in public health and then in a daycare center.
I worked in the dairy factory making yogurt for children.
We earn more here.
Yo trabajé 10 años en educación.
I worked in education for 10 years, and my salary equaled $15 per month. It was never enough because I had to commute back and forth, and it was expensive. Since I came here, I'm doing better economically.
I'm doing better too. Now I can raise pigs for food, which is very expensive.
The food situation is critical because it's very expensive. Cuba is an underdeveloped country, but it is a good country. Here, if someone needs blood or an operation, the state takes care of it.
It's all free.
Yeah, it's all free. In other countries, if you don't have the money, you die. Not here.
Now we have for 2 months not rains in the farm. It's been very hard for us. We were watering last night until 8 in the night by hand in order to make better use of the water we have available at this moment. In the future, in the near future, we plan to have irrigation systems for all the beds. This well was made by hand, and we dug until the 40 meters deep by hand. And there was one man that had enough will to dig the well as much as I had, and was Juan Machado.
I was 14 years old when I learned to find water. Here it is. Right here there is running water. Look, I'm not doing anything, and the stick is going up. Look. Here's the water.
We went already to different places around, to different farms, where Machadito identified the water. And I went with him, and I am trying to learn. So we are trying to connect all the energy possibilities in the farm in order not to use oil. We pump the water with the solar panels and the solar pump. Then we capture the manure and the urine to this mixing tank. The slurry, the manure with water, goes to the biodigester. We have there a tank of 10 cubic meters. The first layer is fresh manure. The biogas press the already fermented manure, and that goes out. We are getting out the energy in biogas that has the manure. And then we use that biogas for cooking, and we have enough biogas to cook every day as much food as we need. Michael is writing his PhD thesis. Now he's living at the farm, and we are sharing let's say, the administration or the design of the farming system.
For those of us involved in sustainable farming, to open relations with the U.S. or to lift the blockade means that many agrochemical companies want to invest in Cuba. These companies investing in Cuba doesn't mean there will be enough food for everyone. 1.2 billion people worldwide are hungry. Despite more agrochemical investment, despite having warehouses full of food, these are companies that make profit from the foods they produce. Just because they produce doesn't solve the hunger problem.
Special thanks to Democracy Now!'s Karen Ranucci, as well as Monica Malemband, for that report in Cuba. Our guest right now, Catherine Murphy, who was on that trip, also a filmmaker who's lived and studied in Cuba. Can you fit the organic agriculture movement in Cuba into the bigger picture? Catherine, is Cuba the only country in the world that gave millions of hectares of acres to people who grow and farm?
Well, part of what happened in Cuba was that in the mid-'80s, Cuba had a highly mechanized and industrialized agriculture system They had more tractors per capita than any country in Latin America, and they were investing a lot of money into national food production. But nonetheless, they were still importing 57% of the calories eaten on the island from the Soviet Union and Soviet bloc countries. So when the Soviet Union fell apart, Cuba lost those imports immediately within a 2-3 year period, along with the 34-35% contraction of their GDP. It launched Cuba into a major economic crisis, and that was a food and agriculture crisis as well, in a central way, because of the loss of the direct food imports and also the loss of the many other imports into the agriculture sector upon which national food production had become dependent. Again, pesticides, fertilizers, petroleum, tractor spare parts for other kind of agricultural machinery. So they were faced with the daunting task of needing to greatly increase food production with a fraction of the resources available. Immediately, city residents in particular, Havana has 2 million of the 11 million people on the island live in Havana, the largest city in the Caribbean. Havana residents started going out and growing food on empty lots that were close to their homes, using any seeds they could find with any tools that were available, and literally on any space that was near their homes, including some in their homes, patios, balconies, rooftops. And urban farming was increasing all around the world at that time in the 90s with global urbanization. But what was different about Havana was that the city government and other structures started to look at how could they strategically support this booming Victory Garden movement, as opposed to other cities around the world where urban food production became illegal and sometimes people were run off. The Havana city government started to look at, well, how can we support food producers in the city, not only support them, but really recognize that food production is a major national priority. So they started finding ways to give urban food producers use rights to land through usufruct, give them sales permits to do direct sales from on site, help them find ways to get water, and help them with training and resources, but really the kind of agriculture that's necessary in small spaces, this highly diversified, intensive planting, was not the kind of agriculture that had happened in Cuba traditionally. So there was a whole new body of knowledge that needed to come to these already farming, urban farmers. And so a permaculture movement was born, the Council of Churches got involved, many community organizations, the Women's Federation, in helping to strategically support the urban farmers. And within several years, they really helped to turn around the most critical part of the food crisis, which was dramatic. I think it's hard to imagine. The caloric intake fell by about half. The average Cuban lost 10 to 20 pounds of body weight. There were a number of health epidemics, including a neuropathy, an eye neuropathy epidemic that resulted in nervous system damage and some eye and vision damage. So this rapid decrease in caloric intake was a serious, was really seen as the most serious problem on the island at the time, and became a priority issue to solve. So with this public-private partnership, they were able to turn it around, and within just a few years, there were tens of thousands of urban gardens around the city and peri-urban gardens, and they were growing 30 to 50% of the fresh vegetables eaten on the island, introducing vegetables that had never been eaten in Cuba before, like broccoli, cauliflower, some things like eggplant that weren't so common, and really improved the quality of the diet. I mean, a lot of those, especially green leafy vegetables, providing key micronutrients and the lack of other proteins. And it changed the cityscape. It vastly improved the food security situation, but it also changed the cityscape. It provided tens of thousands of jobs, significantly for retired people and for women and for youth. And
Catherine, today,
yes.
since we only have 30 seconds, how much food is imported into Cuba? How much do they rely on outside food? And this organic food movement, or farming movement, how much hope do you think it has in a new Cuba?
The figures around how much food is imported to Cuba today is hotly contested. It's still the majority. Some figures show 50%, up to 80% of the food is still imported. Wheat, for example, you can't grow in the tropics. They have to import it. They import a lot of frozen chicken from the United States through Tyson Foods and others. They import rice, but they are still increasing food production on the island of roots, tubers, rice, beans, fruits, and vegetables. And the third agrarian reform that's happening now, giving land, 150,000 people have asked for parcels of land in this new land redistribution.
Catherine, we have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for being with us, filmmaker Catherine Murphy. And also this happening today, landmark act of sports diplomacy. Soccer's New York Cosmos on Tuesday will become the first U.S. professional team to play in Cuba since Presidents Castro and Obama announced their countries would reestablish diplomatic relations. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.